Welcome to another episode of From Startup to Wunderbrand with Nicholas Kuhner.
So, Chaya, I'm happy to have you with us. Chaya is a brand strategist, business name specialist, and copywriter who helps high-performing businesses transform into big league brands. She's the creator of the MAD Brand Strategy Formula, an international speaker and developer of Brand Authority, a training program for marketing creatives. Chaya, lovely to have you. How are you doing?
Great. Thanks for having me.
Today we're going to talk about naming, one of my favorite subjects, because what's in a name?
Most brands can't do what J.K. Rowling does. We're aiming for is a brand name that names your positioning in the market. Even if you can't say exactly what you sell, you can name your positioning. That sounds abstract and magical and maybe something that happened in, the world of Harry Potter, but not in real life. So I'll give you an example. When naming a community resources organization, it's impossible to name all the things that they do, right? Because they'll send support at home for parents, at school for kids. They'll do case management and help you coordinate who all your providers should be. You can't name all those things with one name. Instead, we name their positioning. That brand is called Braverhood because we're naming the world and the change that we're creating with the services that we provide. So that's kind of the direction that I'm taking my clients in as we're trying to navigate a world where all the good names are taken.
So those are some fantastic points. What I really love is that example of J.K. Rowling and her series on Harry Potter. Snape and Dumbledore are absolutely expressive, and you can figure out who are the goodies and who are the baddies. Now, when it comes to naming, and I like that example that you mentioned about what is the name called again? Haven't all the names been taken already? So if the name that you like has been taken, so say your Apples Are Us, how would you go to the client? You can't get Apples Are Us or Apple, because I was just looking at some of the work I've done in the past, and I see that Apple, even when they started out, they had to have negotiated settlements with a whole bunch of other companies. So the iPhone was originally owned by, the name iPhone was trademarked by Cisco, another, I think, a French company, and a Taiwanese company had iPhone, iPhone. They had to pay loads of money to get rid of all of those guys and get their name. And if I can just give one last example, my company's name, Wunderbrand, that was the name. I had this genius idea, and then I went to try and get the .com, and there was already a Wunderbrand, but there's nothing on it. So I went and obviously paid to get that site. But for somebody who's starting out, they've got a great name and they really love the name. What are your steps to getting a suitable name?
This is a bit off tangent, but to your point about Wunderbrand, anything with the word brand in it is going to be taken or extremely expensive to buy the domain. Anything with the word brand is probably already taken or expensive to buy. So think like $10,000 and up. That's a premium domain. There are people called domainers who are the equivalent of real estate investors, but they just buy domains instead of physical properties and then resell those domains for exponentially higher price tags. So if you're looking to buy a domain with a premium word like brand in it, somebody got there first and is going to milk you for every last dollar that they can. So what I would say to someone in that situation is explore something more creative, explore a different domain extension, explore adding words to the name for your URL. So it doesn't just have to be yourname.com. It can be marketwithyourname.com or get the word out with yourname.com, or just get a little playful and go with a URL that's a little different and creative. And that's true in almost every situation. There are some exceptions where you really should have a yourbusinessname.com URL, but most of the time you could get creative. You could do something different. but I
Yeah.
didn't answer your question.
I knew
Which
you're getting there
was-
somehow in a
was gonna
circuitous
get
way.
there. Yes. Which one? The question was what to do if the name you want is already taken, right? Most of the time, the name you want is taken. Instead of seeing that as a setback, you could see it as challenge. And that's true.
So I'm going to ask you how you deal with clients who, and I've had this, the initial name, or let's go back into storytelling in names. If we look at children's names, people say, yes, that looks like a Jonathan, that looks like a Sarah. For businesses, brands, and products, it's a subjective business, isn't it? Names are subjective. I believe meaning is added to them, same as brands, over time. You could call something the shining banana or the orange potato, and it means absolutely nothing, but that meaning is built over time. Nike, Apple. Apple has nothing to do with computers. Now, well, in the past it didn't, and there's some straining to make that fit into computers. But talk to me how you deal with clients who, when they hear a name, say that doesn't sound like a brand name. How do you help them overcome that and say, look, this is something that's going to be built over time, and you need to grow this little brand up, or grow this name up?
Right. I would never present a name that's a complete shock. Before we move into name development, we always work on the brand strategy first. So we talk about how we're going to position the brand. We do a tremendous amount of research and development. We develop the brand personality before we develop the brand name. And then we have a conversation about what kind of name will be a good fit for this brand. And we talk about whether having an evocative name is a good fit for this brand. And when I say evocative, I'm talking about names that don't have a literal connection industry to the product, like the examples you gave, Nike, Apple, Caterpillar. I love that example because it's the perfect example of a name that has everything wrong with it, right? A caterpillar is a tiny, hairy creature. And this company manufactures massive machinery. So what's the deal? With evocative names, you take a risk. And that risk is that initially, when people hear the name of your company, they will not know what you guys are, what you guys do. And the benefit is a unique brand positioning over time. You will infuse a lot of meaning into this name, and then that word becomes synonymous with that meaning. So that's what happened with Nike. That's what happened with Apple. And these are brands that made a conscious decision. We're going to choose a name that makes no sense based on what everybody else is doing, but that's who we are. We're naming our positioning, and 5, 10, 15, 20 years down the road from now, everybody else is going to wish that they were Apple. So when I work with clients, if they're ready to make a decision like that, I present names like that. If they're not ready to take a risk, I will not present names like that. We'll have other strategies that we can use where you can have a name that kind of like the best of both worlds, where it doesn't say exactly what you do, but it's also not completely left field the way Apple or Nike would be.
Well, I want to go deeper on a name being synonymous with the industry, like Apple and Caterpillar. And in South Africa, where I grew up, we hoover things up. Hoover is not somebody's name. That is a vacuum cleaner. It's a hoover.
Right.
We thought that's what hoover meant. We never knew any presidents or anything like that. It shows how strong naming can be. For example, elastoplast, which is a plaster. There's a whole bunch of things, sellotape, all of those things. Back in the day at Interbrand, one of the names that we came up with, not when I say we, I'm taking some glory here, but there's the name for the Wii, WII, which was a ridiculous name for a game, but it was perfect. So Wii, and how it is
Right.
written, coming up with names that are evocative, that you can build meaning around in an industry that has got quite established names in it. So how do you get past Sega and Sony PlayStation, things like that? In terms of going back to the nitty-gritties of naming, one of the challenges I've seen is companies who want to use strange things like Elon Musk, where they have AX, exclamation mark, etc., etc. Those are quite nice to separate yourselves from the market, but that's very difficult to put into social media and websites, right? Have you come across clients who have had strangely spelled names that could actually be detrimental to finding them?
If your name is not sayable, that's a problem. You need to pass a sayability test. Some names aren't particularly strange, but they're difficult to pronounce. And if you're going to have an outbound sales team doing cold calls, tripping over the name, or having the person on the other end saying, "What's the name of your company?" That's a problem. So I've definitely seen that. I've seen brands that invested a lot of money into the branding, into the naming, had a name, had the sales team put it to work, and then had to say, okay, this is so bad. Our sales team is complaining to us all the time. Should we now walk back the name?
Because it brings me to another great name that I love, which is Haagen-Dazs. It's supposed to sound slightly Scandinavian. It's got diaresis, which are all the umlauts, those 2 dots. It's got a dash. It's got everything you should not do for a brand that is going to go into the States. I mean, it's the equivalent of Hyundai or Hyundai. I mean, those guys must have had such a disaster trying to localize the name to the American English-speaking market. So yes, Hagen, a made-up name, because they created something that was unique, something that was ownable, something that really evoked, especially in an English-speaking country, that sounds foreign. It must be expensive. I'm happy to pay a premium for something that's not called Dairy Farm or Ohio State ice cream. This sounds fancy. You can charge a premium for that. So that's great.
If you are naming a brand and you are not as enormous as AT&T, don't go for the acronym. You might feel like if I name my brand the best brand in the world, and then I just take the first letter of each of those words, nobody knows what that stands for. And they're not going to give you time to figure out what it stands for. So you're missing a huge opportunity to have a name that actually means something and to have a name that's memorable. Because if it doesn't mean anything, it's going to be hard to remember. Like, oh yeah, I saw that guy's post on LinkedIn. It was amazing. What was the name of his brand? What was a bunch of letters? Right? You don't remember what the letters are, and you don't remember what the letters stand for because you never knew. So I would say steer away from acronyms. It can be tempting, but it doesn't work. That's not how people consume information.
As you mentioned, in the consumer space, using acronyms is generally a bad idea. We find lots of acronyms in the services space or high touch spaces like law firms and advertising agencies, which have low impact on the end consumer. They've got a small target market, small customer base. So it does make sense sometimes. But yeah, I agree. Consumer facing brands, acronyms are difficult to build meaning around them as well.
Absolutely.
Now, when you go about creating a name, and you spoke about brand strategy being the starting point, so I'm going to say yay, because it makes life easier if you have a guideline for where the business is trying to go, as opposed to just taking a random name. And you offer workshops, you do copywriting and brand strategy. What does a typical workshop look like? What can folks expect?
So typically the session that they have with me lasts anywhere from 60 to 90 minutes. And it's the kickoff of all the other research pieces. Meaning, if I was working with you, Nicholas, I would meet with you, ask you a lot of tough, targeted questions, and I would not accept your answers and just be like, let me put that in. So for example, if I say to you, what's unique about your brand? What do you do differently than others?
Well, that sounds like quite a comprehensive process. So it's not just sticking your thumb in the air and choosing the first name that comes along. There's a lot wound around that. Takes us into the next discussion on tone of voice and how you make the brand name come alive. I suppose that's through visuals and tone of voice. And I take it the tone of voice side is an important part of what you do. Maybe let's talk quickly about tone of voice, and then we'll go into our closing, Chaya.
Worked with a consultant brimming with wisdom. She has so much free information to share. She almost can't stop. She has to be reminded to get paid. That's a sage archetype full of truth and is driven by a desire to share that truth. And knowing what that core motivation is and what your archetype is helps define your brand voice. For example, one of her branded phrases is in her blog. It's called Free Wisdom with an H in it because she's the whiz, right? So wisdom. That's just one example of how the brand manifests the archetype.
And folks sometimes blend that as well. When we've done branding processes, you don't always neatly fit into one box. That's the fun part of the journey, seeing which one can pull together. Similar to humans, brands are happy, fun and playful, but also do CSR and take care of the planet. Well, they've got the adult part to them as well when it comes to other parts of their business, how they deal with finance and aspects like that. It's such a fun process. I'd recommend folks go and understand those 12 archetypes and figure out where your business fits. We could go on about brand strategy, personas, tone of voice, and naming because I love it. But I think what I would like to do is we'll keep it there and maybe chat on another topic in brand strategy later. It would be amazing. Now, if I can just ask, what does 2024 look like for you? 2023 was a weird year. So what can we expect to see from Chaya in 2024, 2025?
Okay, thanks for giving me until 2025 because I took a little more time. This year, I am going to be running the programs that I always run. I will be opening that to experienced marketers who want to learn how to be brand strategists. That will be happening, please God. And another thing that I'm planning is I'm taking a look at my own brand. Right? We all need to do that sometimes. I feel like saying, I looked.
Well, they always say the cobbler's children are always the ones without shoes or the worst shoes. A bit earlier with me before we started the call on free goodies for our guests. Where can I send folks to get some who want to read a little bit more about branding, naming, strategy? Where can I send these folks?
There's an ebook on copywriting with a fillable worksheet. I know people get excited about fillable. So that's in there. There is a video masterclass on how to charge for strategy. We have a series of videos and a masterclass on brand strategy for designers. So specifically for people who work with the visual aspects of the brand, this will take them through a process of how to be strategic about that.
And yeah, I would suggest that folks go and have a look at these fantastic free resources out there written by somebody who obviously knows what they're talking about and is passionate what they're talking about. And just to recap what we've gone through today, we've had a look at naming, we've had a look at the importance of archetypes and personas. We had that great example of Harry Potter. And I think if you can remember that example, it will help you with coming up with names or coming up with new product names in the future. So thank you so much. That's something I'm going to take this and absolutely steal and share with other folks when I try and explain naming. It's one of the best explanations I've heard. Thank you for that.
Thank you, Nicholas. This was fun.